Good afternoon to everyone. We are gathered today for the third part of the Satipatthana series conducted in the memory of the most Venerable Gnanadīpa Mahathero, who passed away after more than 5 decades of practice within the forest of Sri Lanka in the month of September. So this series of talks is conducted in the memory as a way of paying respects to the Venerable in his memory, and of course to the practice that he upheld himself with, as well as motivated so many other monks, especially around the country, around the globe, to practice and to sort of persevere in their practices through the usage of the techniques of Vipassana. So something that I would have to request everyone who are gathered here today is to switch off your cameras, because some of the participants do not have a high bandwidth. So this could slow down their computers. So if you all would switch off your cameras, that will enable everyone to participate in the talk without any internet-related issues. Thank you very much. So today we are going to discuss, I am going to talk to you about the practice of Cittānupassana. The practice of Cittānupassana is somewhat different from the other practices. And Venerable Gnanadīpa himself, towards the latter part of his life, it is said, or it has been reported, that Venerable Gnanadīpa went on to now practice from other techniques of Vipassana, went on to practice Cittānupassana meditations. So this technique of meditation is somewhat different from the other Vipassana techniques which we have learned in the previous week, and we will be learning, also discussing Dhammanupassana next week. How is this different? When we would take the other techniques of Vipassana, for example, we will talk specifically about Kāyanupassana and Vedananupassana, the mindfulness over the body and the mindfulness over the sensations. These techniques of Vipassana are conducted or practiced with direct relation towards the awareness of the object. However, in the practice of Cittānupassana, this becomes a bit different from the normal ways that we would practice other techniques. We would go into it later on. The Buddha speaks about the fact that the mind is the forerunner when it comes to any act of knowing, understanding, or cognition with relations to anything that is brought in through the 5 sensory doors. That is the first part, or the first part of Dhamma that one should understand with relation to practicing or continuing one's practice into Cittānupassana. That in all activities to do with the mind and the body, that the mind is the forerunner. Not just the mind and the body. With all the objects that we know, with all the knowledges that we have, with all the information and data that we bear in mind, colors, objects, forms, all of these concepts that we have in mind are concepts that we have derived through the 5 sensory bases. We have stored up this data within us, and it is through this memory that we are able to do and be what we are today. In whatever unique personality characteristics that we have. When this happens or when this is done, we often, even with regards to meditation, it becomes a bit difficult for a person to properly locate the actuality of a phenomena. And in doing so, what we often do is we see the form of I whilst we practice Vipassana. I will explain this. How does this happen? If we, at this moment, right now, whilst all of you are listening to me, if you just close your eyes for a moment and just focus on the breath, just relax the breath, relax everything, put aside everything that you're doing, and just observe the breath for a moment. As you breathe in and out, observe the breath as it moves through the nostrils. Now, in this process, the seeing of the breath is done or experienced as a person who is experiencing the breath. Right now, you can open your eyes. Now, think about what you have just done, the experience that you have just undergone. You were observing the breath. The breath was observed by you. This sentence is quite important to understand. In this process of observation, if we maintain the fact as a meditator that we are observing the object, then what we are reaffirming is the sense of I, the concept of I. In this practice of Cittānupassana, as we go into it, or if we have a good teacher and when we are taught about it, we identify that there are two kinds of mind. This is important. Please make a mental note or write it down. The noting mind and the knowing mind. The knowing mind and the noting mind. Let's take an object to understand it further. When we have an object which has now appeared through the eye base, the ear base, the nose base, the tongue base, or the body base, through the 5 sensory doors, what happens? The noting mind notes the appearance of this object. Now, where does Cittānupassana happen now? A person would assume that Cittānupassana happens at the stage of noting. But this is not true. The mind, if this is the object, the mind which observes the object, remember that enlightenment is not in the object. Enlightenment is in the mind. Cittānupassana, similarly, is conducted towards the mind, not the object. Whatever the object is, whether it is rupa, whether it is a material form that you see, whether it is something that you smell, taste, hear, or feel, Cittānupassana is not observing that object. It's not. It is the observing of the mind that observes the object. It is the observing of the mind that observes the object. That is where it is important to understand the existence of the object, the existence of the noting mind which notes this object, and then the existence of the knowing mind which knows the noting process, which notes the object. The Cittānupassana awareness is at the level of knowing, not noting. Every time that we allow the noting to be what we do within Cittānupassana, we are reinstigating the values of me, myself, and I. Because we are programmed, unfortunately, in such a way. Concepts as a phenomena, we will never be able, or it will be very difficult to separate ourselves from concepts. Panyapti, we say. These concepts, whether it is name concepts or form concepts, are that which always exists in the mind. Through the Cittānupassana process, now when it comes to Cittānupassana, one of the other things that makes it different from the other two Vipassana techniques that we have already discussed with other teachers is the fact that when it comes to Cittānupassana, it is very important to have a person who understands guiding you. Why is this? Because the occurrences of mind are so subtle that it is important to have a person who has undergone those experiences and understood those experiences to give you or shine a ray of light upon you, to give you that wisdom, to give you the guidance which you might require to progress in the path. Because the subtleties are that much fine. When it comes to Vedananupassana or Kayanupassana, it is somewhat easier to practice these techniques with the support of a good book, a good piece of Dhamma. But the subtleties of Cittānupassana are far greater than something that we would see with regards to Kayanupassana and Vedananupassana. Now, when it comes to this technique, coming back to observation. Now, it is said by the great Sunlun Sayadaw, who is the prime authority of Cittānupassana meditation in Burma. He was the foremost, the senior monk after Mahasi Sayadaw. He was the most senior monk in the Mahasi tradition. Sunlun Sayadaw later on moved away from the Mahasi tradition, and he retired to his village monastery and he started practicing Cittānupassana and in the meanwhile teaching Cittānupassana. Something that Sunlun Sayadaw says in his teachings is, in Cittānupassana, you will hear, you will taste, you will smell, you will see, you will feel. It is all right that all of these things happen. However, if you know what you are seeing, you are not meditating. If you know what you are smelling, you are not meditating. If you know what you are hearing, you are not meditating. Likewise, the Sunlun Sayadaw maintains that if the meditator, I can see some confusion going through the eyes of our participants. Don't worry, I'm going to come to it. If you know the object that is appearing, if you are identifying what now arises, remember, you have gone too much into the noting mind. The knowing mind can penetrate through the noting into the object. Remember, the noting mind, why we name it the noting mind is because the knowing mind is only supposed to know the process of noting, not know the process of the noting, right? It should, again, let me explain. I think I should put it better. The knowing mind should know the process that should know that the process of noting is happening, not the process of the noting. So if I am, or if there is a certain taste in the mouth and you're meditating, with the right perspective and attitude, one would be aware that there is a taste, but not identify with what the taste is, because the identification of the taste is connected to the I. Because how do you know it? Because you cognized it before. Identifying with the data or the bank of data that we have gathered in the past. To cut off that relation between I and the process of now getting rid, letting go, what we do is we do not go beyond the level of knowing that there is something to note. Knowing that there is something to note. So Anapanasati, breathing meditation, can be used as an anchor. The parts of the body can be used as an anchor, but that is only in the beginning. Now, with techniques such as Anapanasati, breathing meditation, with techniques such as sensations, we find it easier compared to Cittānupassana at certain moments, because there is a base of the mind to rest or to have as an anchor. When it comes to Cittānupassana, the anchor is the knowing mind, which can be a little bit tricky to first know. But it does get easier with practice. It is very similar. Personally, I can relate this experience to, and I think most of you would similarly be able to relate your experiences of Anapanasati to this. Remember, when you started off Anapanasati practice, you trying to observe the breath. The moment that you apply the mind to the breath, you started controlling the breath. That is because through the noting mind, you were looking directly at the object. So it was very difficult for you to come to a standpoint of just observing the breath without controlling it. As you progressed, what happened? You were able to now observe, to sort of come out of sort of personalizing that experience of breathing, to sort of come out and observe this process of breathing arising and passing away, arising and passing away. Now that is the knowing mind. I think now it makes a little bit more sense in practice. That is the knowing mind. This knowing mind has no right, should not be judging. The moment you allow the mind to judge, you have crossed over from knowing to noting. This we must be very clear upon. We do not skip or jump from this situation. That is where now then we are able to maintain the focus that we should be in observing the mind. In observing the mind. In Cittānupassana meditation, we have these different emotions that can come up. We have these different feelings that come up. We have different identities or things that we personally take as ourselves that come up. In all of these states that arises, it is very important to note the arising and falling away, or else it is again very difficult to maneuver the fact of control, or not rather control, that is a very bad word to use. The fact of bare awareness upon the object. Bare awareness. You are not supposed to do anything. The practice is very simple, Sun Lun Sayadaw says. Sun Lun Sayadaw says the practice is very simple. But getting to know how to maneuver the mind, that is where the trick is. In this process, being able to be the observer, but not dying down or diving into the being is where your standpoint is where your standpoint remains and will be. When you are writing, when you are planning, when you are doing any sort of action, you train your mind to be able to be aware of the noting mind conducting, performing this action. Conducting, performing this action. This also enables a person to tap into the ability of being able to see the newness in every moment. Cittānupassana meditation is fantastic to see the newness of every moment of every mind. If manured properly, every moment that we have, because sometimes when we sit in meditation for an hour, hour and a half, maybe even 30 minutes, we sometimes get bored. We sometimes feel it's monotonous. But when you have this Cittānupassana in the present moment, just the knowing, you do not have those other problems that arise with the past and the future being monotonous. Why? You are in the present moment and you are able to maintain your mind at a situation of knowing rather than that situation of noting and sort of bringing the I concept into the mind. Cittānupassana, like many other techniques, like all techniques of Vipassana, wholly depends on how skillful you are at putting aside the I. The moment the I comes in, your Vipassana is gone. This is where we have to maneuver. This is where we have to maneuver. Vedananupassana. You have a sensation which comes up. It's a painful sensation. We very well know painful sensations in meditation, don't we? Meditation is sometimes often connected to pain in our minds. Why? Again, the same thing. The I went there, it created an identity. People often say, oh, meditation, it hurts too much. It's too much of trouble. It's too tense. It's too difficult to do. Why? Again, the I has come in there. When that I appears, the I always wants to be the big man. It always wants to be the cushy one. It always wants to be comfortable. The I. That's the way the I is. It always wants to have the higher ground and comfy. That is why in this Vipassana practice, this I has been very spoken about in great detail, because most of the development that we would enjoy in the future is wholly dependent on you not associating this I with the practice. Not associating this I with the practice. Now Sun Lun Searo goes on to speak about. He speaks about the understanding of now the base of getting rid. How do we get rid of this I? Right now, this is something that we have as Buddhists that one would sort of ponder on, or one would almost all talks would ponder on the fact of how do you get rid of the I? The I cannot be got rid of. You can't get rid of the I with theory. You have to get rid of the I and look into what the I is in practice. That is why, out of all techniques of meditation which were available during the time of the Buddha, Vipassana meditation became so popular, because it was the only technique which allowed people to identify this I in experience. You see this. You exactly see this. As we dwell deeper into Cittānupassana, you see the association of the concepts, the mind, and the body. The concepts, the mind, and the body. This becomes very clear. As you go deeper, you understand how this concept has roots within you. How when these concepts are disturbed, how you become disturbed. This is the I, the faculty of I, rampant within you, burning inside of you. You figure this out through that practice. Through that practice. It is important to note that as we go through this practice of any sort of vipassana, we must put aside all the data that we know with regards to Dhamma. Even with regards to Cittānupassana meditation is based on the study of Panyapti, which is what we study right before we even start the chapter on Chittas. The Chittas, which is consciousness, the mental factors, and then in practice, it is the vittis, or the processors of mind, which allows for the mind to process. This becomes the main frame to understand or what you will be experiencing during the time of Cittānupassana. Venerable Gnanadīpa has a beautiful way of explaining this. He explains the flow of the mind in this way. When he is asked about the processors of the mind, a monk uses the word distinct consciousness or distinct qualities of consciousness. Venerable Gnanadīpa said, that is correct in theory. For theory, that is a good term to use. But when it comes to practice, it is not distinct, it is a stream. And this struck me because this is perfectly which is mentioned in the Abhidhamma. The processes of viti, the word viti is a stream. The processes that conduce to a mind operating in the way that it does is a stream of consciousnesses. It is not distinct because one thing, we are unable to see this distinction. We are not Buddhas, right? We are not Buddhas. We are unable to see this distinction. We are only able to see the cause and relation which supports the consciousnesses to arise and pass away. The three characteristic hence becomes very important when it comes to understanding, the persona of I. And every time I becomes powerful, we would experience now practically when the I becomes powerful, what happens? Headaches, tenseness around the chest, groveling in the stomach, thighs start to pain. But when it's Cittānupassana, something specifically that happens is tenseness around the forehead area and the head area, the back of the head for some, and even on the upper part of the chest right here. It starts to become somewhat tense. What is this now? The mind has put too much of effort, and this effort is now trying to, or this push of effort is now constricting the mind rather than opening the mind. When that constricting of mind occurs through the awareness process, when you're trying to be aware, when the constricting of us, if you're trying to constrict, if you're being too strict, now then you feel this tenseness growing. That is a sign to say, now the I is coming up. Who is trying to attain here? No one. No one is trying to attain anything here. That's the difficult part to get. when it comes to sort of understanding how to balance this mind at that point, you must understand no one is trying to achieve or attain anything here. The more the person is trying to achieve and attain, the tenseness increases. It becomes more of a difficult practice when it comes to maintaining that mindfulness in the correct place. I like to always use the sort of the visual of being a mountain. This visualization of being a mountain, there are so many things happening. A mountain is great, it is big. The everything which is happening seems to be so trivial compared. There are cows grazing on the grasses of the fields, there are trees growing, there's wind blowing, there are people hiking and walking and pasture. All of these things are happening. However, the mountain does not move. The mountain is there. The mountain does not react to any of these things. It is just there. That is exactly when it comes to Vipassana with any technique, from Kaya to Dhamma, from the mindfulness of body to the mindfulness over the Dhammas and phenomena. This is the attitude which is told to be maintained. That attitude which is somewhat devoid of I, just be the observer. It's a very simple practice, but when it comes to the way of practice is very simple, but it is only to find that right place, which then you must struggle a bit, right? That you must struggle a bit. Now, as we go on, in Cittānupassana, right? As we go on in Cittānupassana, the Cittānupassana practice, in practical terms, as we identify the knowing mind, the knowing mind has to now be related to the present moment. It is a part of the present moment, but it has to be related to the present moment when it comes to you doing whatever that you do through your day, right? And this might seem impossible, but it is very possible with the right practice. Remember, Sunnun Sayadaw expresses upon this fact. The mind is not a pure abode, right? We often, when it comes to meditation or any other practice to do with spirituality, when it comes into spirituality, we assume that the mind must be pure. Remember, if the mind is pure, there is no reason for any of us to be here today. Even I won't be here today. Why? You think there's nothing to do? The mind is already pure. It is the mind is by nature flawed and is a mixture of both good and bad. First point of information. Remember the most basic of teachings. There are 6 roots of mind: greed, hatred, delusion, non-greed, non-hatred, non-delusion. This is what formulates the roots of the mind of consciousness. Either it is good or bad. This is a part of the mind. Sunnun Sayadaw says, know this. Stop assuming that through your practice, you will always have wholesome, pious, good, Shraddha-filled, faith-filled minds in your mind. No, you won't. You'll be scolding people, you'll be shouting at people, you'll be cursing, you'll be wishing for different other things, yet you will also be having good, pleasant, kind, loving, compassionate, these thoughts as well. Cittānupassana practice can be developed, practiced, cultivated through the good and bad. Remember, good is very subtle. It's like a feather, you see. It is very light. It is something which is peaceful. Hence, because it's peaceful, it's a bit difficult to grab hold of. You often let it slide in the mind. Why? Because it's peaceful. No need to bother with it. Huh? But that is also wrong, but we will come to that in a bit. When it comes to negative forms of mind, it is gross, it is hard, it is somewhat tangible in a way, if we might use that word. It is very tangible in a way because you see it. Negativity is easier to practice that awareness when it comes to observing the mind, because you see it so well compared to the mind, compared to a positive, happy, wholesome mind. So please, I implore all the meditators here to get rid of this notion that during meditation, what you should be expecting is all these good minds. That is just a notion that is curtailing your practice. Good and bad are a part of us. Use it in your meditation because that is reality. Every time that we would assume something different than that reality, which is the reality of the existence of the six roots in your existence of mind, what we are again reaffirming is I. Because why? You have a notion of what your I is, and that notion you're applying, and you want meditation to fall and agree with that notion. Again, the I arising. When that happens, now you are constricting your practice, and it is far more difficult to now realize, and understand with wisdom what is happening. Sun Lun Sayadaw says, now I am basing this talk and all this information and guidance that I am giving you today on the practice of and teachings of Sun Lun Sayadaw, because in the world, in the Theravadin world today, Sun Lun Sayadaw is the authority on Cittānupassana, right? So there might be other teachers who are teaching it, but Sun Lun Sayadaw has been sort of accepted as the authority and the foremost practitioner on Cittānupassana, who is also regarded as a saint in Burma. So I am basing this talk today on his teachings, right? Something that Sun Lun Sayadaw goes to say, Sila, Samadhi, Panya. When the Samadhi goes on to Panya, and when you're able to develop Prajna, wisdom, this wisdom has the ability to dispel. It is like somewhat like a bit of sage to the demons, right? You see, the wisdom has its ability to dispel I. It has the ability to see deeper into what I is. And there is no better technique out there in Vipassana to see the I as much, or how to the extent that Cittānupassana easily shows us what the I is. And through this, as we go on, we go through experiences of both pleasure and pain, negative and positive. After we go through that, then we come into this state where it is rather empty, we say sometimes. It is rather very peaceful. And some might also say that it felt like absolute samadhi. Some would say it is samadhi as well. What do you do? I think in Anapanasati practitioners often experience this state as well, right? Where now the body disappears, the mind disappears. It is as if you are in pinch darkness, right? And what do you do at this state? This appears in Cittānupassana as well. That state which we then come into, because this state we often experience for in two positions. One, when we are streamlining onto samadhi, right? When we are streamlining onto samadhi, we go in and come out. Again and again, we go in, come out, go in, come out of that state. And then we experience it when we are in a state of equanimity. However, that state of equanimity, because we have often not had many experiences of equanimity, because we are not equanimous beings by condition, we always either exist on the extreme parts of the spectrum rather than the equanimous parts of the spectrum. Due to these two positions, we experience this state as a beginner. What do you do in this state? You now observe, you are able to observe the mind and in or as it is in its equanimous neutral form. You see, even if it is somewhat like samadhi, even if it is like a sensation, hearing, smell, anything of the object, anything to do with the object, even if it is a state, what do you now experience in Cittānupassana? The knowing mind does not entangle itself with the noting mind. It does not do this. It remains and just observes the noting mind from its position. This is the step or how one would start their Cittānupassana practice. This is how one would start their Cittānupassana practice. How can we further understand this position? It is through practice. Allow yourself to just let it go. Have the mind, have a position. You can start with focusing, it is said, either the middle point of the head or the middle point of the chest, not the lower, but right at the middle, maybe even next to the heart at the middle point. You can even focus on this point if you need an anchor, because we are often used to anchors in meditation. You can focus on this point and observe. And when you do so, you must make sure that whatever which is happening, nothing can disturb me. Whatever that arises, nothing can disturb me, because why? You know. What do you know? You have wisdom. Where did you get that wisdom from? You got that wisdom from the Dhamma, the teachings of the Buddha, which says anything is possible around you. The potential for the arising and the passing away of phenomena is limitless. Anything can happen, any sound can arise. Don't be surprised. Let anything arise. Take all of that which arises, anything that arises, as an object to see, to say that is happening. Not go into the intricate details of what exactly which is happening, but knowing that there is a phenomena of hearing, a phenomena concerned with seeing, a phenomena concerned with smelling or tasting or feeling, and being able to observe that part without grabbing hold of the object and making it yours. There is nothing to make yours here. You are only to observe. You are only to observe. Now, let us go into a 5-minute break. And after the 5-minute break, we will be doing a bit of meditation concerning Cittānupassana. And afterwards, we will open up for any questions that you might have. So if you do have any questions, make sure that you are most welcome to unmute yourselves and ask the question yourself, or you can even put it on the chat section. For those of you who are listening in through Facebook Live, you can also put it on the chat section, and we'll be taking the question from both those places. So thank you very much. I will see you back in 5 minutes. In Burma, we have this saying amongst meditators when it comes to Cittānupassana. That is, not controlling, not too forcefully, not controlling or manipulating, not trying to make it happen, and not causing any tension. Right? That is something in Burma, many of the meditators, they know this by heart. And every time that some sort of tension arises, they remind themselves what to do through this sort of fourfold stanza that they have. They have a lot of poems, you see, to help with different things. I see that some are trying to write it down, so I will repeat it. Not too forcefully, not controlling or manipulating, not trying to make it happen, and not causing tension. Observe it as it is. Right? Observe it as it is. I will send it out to everyone in an email if you want with the update on the next session. But this is something that we have to all remember with this practice. In Cittānupassana specifically, because Cittānupassana does not have a material base. So it makes this technique far more subtle than the other techniques that we would have already discussed, than the other techniques that we have discussed. Also, in this technique, labeling is not something that we do. We do not label things. We do not label a negative mind as a negative mind. We do not label a positive mind as a positive mind. Because again, that would mean going into the noting mind. We are only to observe the mind with that amount of disattachment and non-judgment. I think we'll be able to discuss this. If anyone has any questions regarding that part, which forms the base of how you would do Cittānupassana, you're most welcome to bring it up at the question and answer session. So now let's do a little bit of meditation. Let's do a little bit of meditation, comfortably bringing yourselves into a seated position, where you can comfortably meditate based on Cittānupassana. Today, I will guide you as you take a deep breath in letting go of the breath, relaxing yourself, letting go of anything that you have to do, letting go of any other burdens that might be burdening your mind at the moment. Allow yourself to come into this present moment, here and now, here and now, here and now. Be very gentle with yourself as you observe first the body, the posture that you are in, not to change it or to control it or manipulate it in any way. Just observe, just observe. From the body, guiding your attention to the breath. As you breathe in and breathe out, relaxing all the muscles all around the body. With every breath, the body and the mind relaxing deeper and deeper. Letting go of any need to cling on to hold on to anything. Just being in this present moment, here and now. Here and now. Here and now. Guiding your attention, directing your attention to the mind. And just observe the mind as it is right here, right now. Not setting any plans for the mind, not telling the mind what to do. You just have one simple task. Just observe the mind. Observe the mind. Whatever sound, smell, taste, feelings you experience, there is no need for you to identify them. That is not your duty. There is no need for you to go behind the objects. Just observe. Let the noting mind appear to you. You do not need to go searching for it. Just be aware and it will appear to you. Just observe. It is very simple. Just observe. Whatever arises in the mind, good or bad, or neutral, fast or slow, big or small, regardless. You are not to identify the whole extent of the object. but know that the mind is at play. Observe the mind. You are not hoping that the meditation would be good or bad. You are just being in this moment, observing the mind as it is and as it appears, and as it appears. The muscles relaxed, no tension. There's no need to try too hard. Let the mind, the noting mind, come to you. It'll make itself visible to you. Just observe, directing your awareness towards the mind. Knowing the arising and passing away of the mind. As you explore the mind, observe the actions of the mind, how the mind shifts from one object to the other. Observe gently. Remember that this is not a race. Allow yourself to stop competing and to just be in this peaceful moment, being aware of the mind with whatever it does, with whatever it does. Just be, just be, just be. Taking a gentle breath in and letting go of the breath very slowly. Observing the mind, observing this act of breathing. As you take another deep breath in, breathing out. Guiding your attention to the body, the breath, as you gently awaken to this present moment, here and now. Wonderful. Now, so this is the time that you can ask any questions that you might have regarding this practice of Cittānupassana that we have spoken about. We already have some questions, so we will go through these questions, and then if you have any question, remember, big or small, it doesn't matter. If you have a question and if it would help your practice, do put it down and send it over, and I will try my best to answer them. So Don has a question for us. Is I just another concept that is deeply ingrained within us? Yes, it is. I is a concept that is deeply ingrained with us. It is also a hindrance, as we know. The concept of I is a creation of delusion. In seeing the I, now for a person in Cittānupassana, oh, that is a very pertinent point. Now a person might sometimes see the I too often in the practice. See the I too often in the practice. He always sees the I. I is the only thing that comes up to the mind. I. It is all about what he or she wants or likes and all of that. How can a person like that persevere in the practice of Cittānupassana? It is as if asking a criminal, are you a criminal? Asking a thief, are you a thief? Right at the really nailing right where it hurts. How do you practice? With Cittānupassana, you see the existence, you see as you observe that. If you need to go further, what you observe is the delusion, the creation, the prajnapti. That is what we then observe there, not the names that we would say Bhante, or, it's not the names that we would create or call ourselves. Right? It is the delusion. It is somewhat like, you see, when we grow up, we are hindered by the past, childhood trauma, we say. But as we grow up and we become wiser, we lose the ability slowly to sort of blame it on the trauma all the time. What the wise and intelligent would do is they would take responsibility for this, and they would awaken themselves to the fact that you have a conscious decision at the moment, right? The way that we would look at, observe the I and the delusion that it is born with and born by is also somewhat similar. You stop blaming the nature or saying that it is a part of nature, and you take it as a conscious decision of the moment. There you have more power and ability over the way the I perseveres in your practice. So Don, yes, it is a concept, and it is a byproduct or a product of delusion, which is, of course, a part of our whole existence. Then we have Nisanka. Nisanka is asking us, Bhante, can you please reflect on the thinking mind on Cittānupassana? Much gratitude. Nisanka, let me know if you still have this question, and I will go into it. Okay. Bhante, Nirmali is asking us, Bhante, should a beginner start practicing Cittānupassana by focusing on the center of the forehead at first, only to enable the process at first only? Are there any publications or teaching of the Sayadaw you talked about available to read online? Much merit to you. Yes. So Nirmali, you could start. A beginner can start, right? Using an anchor of the middle point of the forehead, the middle point of the chest. The middle point of the chest is the anchor that Sunlun Sayadaw speaks about specifically. It is not the forehead he speaks about the middle point of the chest. So yes, a beginner can use this as a way of as a way of guiding oneself into Cittānupassana, that is all right. There are publications. So when I send the update email of the Satipatthana for the next session, I will make sure to include all of that, right? So make sure anyone who has not subscribed to the Dhamma Center email, make sure you do subscribe so that you will get the publication link to Sunlun Sayadaw's teachings. There are not many books available, but there are some books available. So I will send a copy of that by online. When I meditate on the I, by just observing its movements, cravings, intentions, I notice my life simplifying, and I find my environment more at peace. Why is that? Thank you. Okay. When I meditate on the I, now, that is a no-no. We do not meditate on the I. We meditate or our focus with regards to Cittānupassana, we focus on the mind of the moment, the present moment. If we are focusing on the I, right, we are re-establishing I. Now, yes, this could bring some sort of short-term peace and tranquility, but long-term, it is not something which is dependable on, because we are re-establishing the notion of I. We meditate on the mind, and through the mind, we observe the mind. These two minds we have conduced as the noting mind and the knowing mind, right? I'm just going to draw I don't know whether you can see this, but this is what I mean, right? Now the outer one is the knowing mind, right? This inner one is the noting mind. Now the noting mind is what observes the object, but the knowing mind, this outer one, is the observation of the mind. So what we have to do is really, during Cittānupassana, we observe this mind, not this. We do not observe this object. We only, through the knowing mind, observe the noting mind. That is what we do. So in that way, we do not allow ourselves to go to the object. The moment we go to the object, the I comes back, because how do we know the object? The only way we know the object is through prior conditioning. For example, if you take the color of the wall behind me, what color is it? It is white color. Now the color white is a panyakti, or a concept. The color yellow is a concept. The color burgundy, red, is a concept. These are concepts. The moment that we establish or focus on a concept, what happens? We establish a sense of I. We establish that in Vipassana we break. Now in some of the techniques, we use the concepts, for example, the Kasina meditations, the elemental meditations, the different meditations, the different meditation subjects we use to suppress the hindrances. What we do is we advert the mind to this object, and by the adversion, the object becomes more powerful, suppressing the hindrances, allowing the mind to go into samadhi. In Vipassana, what do? We look at the reality of the world right into its being and existence, and we know the arising, the possessing, and the passing away, the impermanence, the suffering, and the non-self. existent in each and every moment of that reality's existence. Two different techniques. It is Vipassana that allows us to achieve enlightenment, not Samatha meditations, right? So if you have a further question, you can ask. But that is my answer. We do not focus on the I, we focus on the mind that observes the knowing mind that observes the noting mind. The knowing mind that observes the noting mind. Dil. All right. So what is Panyapti? Right? What is Panyapti? Now, Panyapti, to some, we have our Abhidhamma students here who we have discussed. I'm sure many other people also know what Panyapti is, but there might be people who do not know what Panyapti is. Panyapti, or concepts, are of two types. We have Nama Panyapti, right, which is name concepts, right? Now, what are name concepts? Name concepts are those things that we give. For example, my name is Bhante Pannavamsa, right? All of you have different names, right? This name is a title or a concept that we give on to you. We call this color white, which is a concept again. There is nothing, if we are to find, okay, what is it about the color? We give meaning to that word. That is a panyapti, the concept that we create. Then we have the form panyaptis, form concepts. These concepts, for example, if you are to take this table, if you are to take a table can be maneuvered, maybe remade into maybe a chair, right? Or maybe if you to take out the legs, you could make it into something else. A concept is something that is made up of different phenomena. It is brought together. Like, for example, the body. The body, when the skin is in this way, when the organs are where it is, when the blood is where it is, when the heart is where it is, when it is in this way, we call this a human form. We call this a human form. But if we are to separate all the limbs, the skin, the muscles, the sinews, all the blood, all of that separately, we would not call it a human form. We would not call it a human form. There you see, a concept is made up. Then we have, right, the Paramatta Satyas. Right? Paramatta Satyas are ultimate realities. On the other hand, now this is to have further understanding of concepts that I'm bringing Paramatta Satyas or ultimate realities in English, which is to say that this is in its ultimate form. There is no further breaking up of an ultimate reality. There is no further breaking up of an ultimate reality. The element of earth is an ultimate reality. It speaks about the features of earth, the tangible nature even in this skin, or even in this on this computer. That nature which allows a formation to exist. Now that can't be further divided. Whereas a table can be remade into something which is different. Now then we have the concepts, and then we have the satya or the truth or paramatta satya. So in that way, so panyapti is all which is mind. For example, let's take a mundane example. She is bad, right? That is a concept, right? I like my tea with 2 spoons of sugar, or else my day is bad, right? That is a thing that you have held on to. If we are to break that down, you can break that mind to realize what is really fueling that sort of consciousness, right? When you have held on to certain feelings, right? All of these things, then the creation of the personality and characteristics that you have, these we relate to also as concepts that we have integrated into ourselves. So that is what we relate to as concept. We can't be completely free of concepts, but we can use the concept to further our understanding of ultimate realities, understanding of reality, enabling us to attain to higher states of mind. That is possible through concepts. That is possible through concepts. Okay. How do you observe or notice without labeling? Just observe. Know that there is nothing more to do and be all right with it. Just observe. Just be in that moment, allowing yourself to just observe on whatever which is. It is very difficult to sort of tell this in sort of word form, but it is in a sense of just being in that moment and directing. The example actually that I was thinking of is, if you would think of a drawing of the eye and how the light comes through and touches upon the back of the retina, allowing for image to be formed. Remember that, right? We remember that. I think grade 8 biology, right? All of us know it, right? How the lines are drawn to say the image, how it comes into the eye. Now, directing your mind. What we do is when we direct, I am not looking for us in meditation, we are not to look for a specific thing, but we direct the mind to that area. Just as, for example, in Vedananupassana, in the mindfulness of the sensations, we direct the mind, for example, to the forehead. But we are not looking for a sensation. We are only directing the attention to that area. In a similar way, in the mind, we direct our attention to the mind that is working, the noting mind. But we are not having the specificities of what we might encounter through that observation. If you do think, okay, now I'm going to observe the mind, and during this time I'm going to be able to see this and this and this and this and this and this is going to happen afterwards, and this and this and this and this. Now that is the I. That is where, then what do? Right? If you are in a process of Cittānupassana and this happens, what do? Do you stop your meditation? No, you start seeing that the I is in process. And when that happens, now with the observation, the Sati Cetasika becomes more powerful, and now the I concept becomes weak. That is called in Patthana Adipati Pachaya. Predominance, dependence. This condition, the law of predominance. Adipati Pachaya. Now, because of this Adipati, what happens is when one mental factor becomes much more powerful for than the others, that comes to overpower the others. When that happens, now you're able to observe. But that is not forced. It is an organic process. So this is something that you have to realize by practicing. And then you encounter upon that threshold where it now becomes possible. It is very difficult to tell, okay, do this, and now you will see it. But yes, the direction is there. Follow it and see. It's not that difficult. So, Sugat, is it that mind rise based on Nama Rupa illustrations in consciousness? Is it that mind arise based on Nama Rupa illustrations in consciousness? Then if so, would mind meditate mind meditation enable gradual erasing of the illustrations. Okay. So this is actually explained in the Tripitaka. It is explained as if two sort of poles are sort of balancing on each other. The mind needs both, without which the mind can't exist. Remember, the main action or the main purpose of the mind is to cognize an object. That is why the mind is there. So the mind will always take an object. And this object is either nama or rupa, materiality or mentality. If so, then would Cittānupassana meditation enable erasing? No. Not erasing. Better understanding. Now creating for higher understanding of the mind and matter around us. We are not erasing anything. We are now able to better understand the circumstances and situations of nama, rupa, and reality all around us. It becomes much, much more beautiful now because it all makes sense. When you realize that it has been lust that has been making you feel this way, that it has only been your conceit and though hatred that has been not allowing you to forgive a person that you are unable to forgive. Now you find the strength to work with these things and realities of the world. We are not trying to erase any of these concepts, right? Even an arahant would use concepts, remember. If we do not have concepts, we can't even tell a person the road to go somewhere, right? So we are not trying to erase anything. We then have a more purer reality-based understanding on what is, right? A reality-based understanding on what is, right? The present moment experience in Cittānupassana, rising and passing of all phenomena. Padma, I can't understand what your question is. Padma G. Right, okay. Nilma, okay. When meditating, is it right to observe your mind from outside of you? Okay. This is the mixing of two techniques, right? You have now mixed two techniques. The observing outside of your mind, I understand, is a technique that we often use with Kaya Anupassana and some certain meditations like Attika Sanya, which is a skeleton meditation, right? Certain meditations like that. Even when we sometimes do certain metta meditations, loving kindness meditations, we use this technique. But in Cittānupassana, remember, there is no form that we are focusing on, right? In the beginning, yes, we might use the middle of the forehead or the middle point of the chest, but this is it. We are only using this as an anchor. We are not focusing on this point, but rather basing ourselves here, right? So you observing the mind from outside of you, if this is in a way sort of examining the mind from outside the body, that is not the proper technique. What we try to do is forget about the form and observe the mind as it is, because if you take it back, you are now basing yourself on this form, right? You're often basing yourself on this form, or you're creating an imaginary rupa to symbolize the body. This we do not do in Cittānupassana because, again, Cittānupassana is about the mind rather than anything else. Right? I understood that observing without judgment in this meditation, so we stop thinking over thoughts. Is that right? Yes, no judgment. We do not, again, no judgment, no labeling, right? We do not require at this stage to label the consciousnesses or types of consciousnesses that arise. We only thing that we do is we observe the noting mind. right? We do not label, because the moment that we label, again, you're labeling with what? Data that I has collected. I has collected, right? If you refer to I as a person, I has collected that data. So you are now attempting to achieve Nibbana through the concepts that I has collected in your mind. We put the I aside and just observe the mind. That is all we do. Okay. Is adjusting Anupama, I'm sorry. Um, Bhante, a question for you. Is adjusting my position during meditation going against Cittānupassana, as there is not, as there is noting a discomfort which is a judgment and reinforcing I. There is no rule against changing your position, moving around. There is no rule as saying that you can't do so. However, we must also have some discipline to say, okay, I won't move, because if you start moving, right, each and every time, this is a disturbance that you bring in, some even in a subtle way, right? Even in a subtle way, it is a disturbance. We do try to not move all the time, but if you absolutely must, you can. But remember, Anupama or Anupama, when there is a pain that occurs, what do you do? I'm going to use your question to bring this. I know that this is not what you asked, but I'm going to use your question for this. What do? You observe the mind without identifying or making the pain yours, in Cittānupassana as well, right? You observe the mind without taking the pain on. This will either then allow you to focus and continue focusing on the mind, or the pain disappears, right? That can be done by you not focusing on it. Is all to do with, are you taking or accepting the pain as me, myself, and I? The personalization must disappear and must not be done. This is in that way, that process of letting go, right? In its most practical and raw form, right? So yes, it is okay to change, but don't get too comfortable changing all the time, right? Change only when you absolutely have to. But remember, use pain that you experience as a subject, right? Not going into the pain, but observing the mind that is being pained by that pain, and just not identifying and personalizing it to you, right? All right. There are many compliments as well. I'm not going to read those out. Nisanka or Nisanka. Venerable Bhante, following on my question on, can you please reflect on thinking mind on Cittānupassana? Maybe you reflected on this during the meditation that I missed. So if this was reflected during the meditation, could I please ask you to repeat? If not, let me put it in another way. The characteristic of the mind is to think in a conventional sense. So in contemplating Cittānupassana during formal practice, that the mind act differently. Okay, so I'm going to read that question to you. The characteristic of the mind is to think in a conventional sense. So in contemplating Cittānupassana during formal practice, does the mind act differently? Okay. The mind is conditioned, yes. However, the mind also has the ability to think on its own. The only reason now the Buddha says that the mundane mind is unable to take Nibbana as object or to understand what Nibbana truly is. Why? Because us mundane beings have never had such an experience that we could compare with, which would tell us about Nibbana. So for a mundane person to even imagine, okay, this must be the way Nibbana is far beyond. You cannot. You have to come to the experience to know exactly what it is. In Cittānupassana, that is why we have the knowledge of anicca, dukkha, anatma. Although we are not applying anicca, dukkha, anatma in the same sense, like for example, like we would apply butter on a slice of toast, we are not doing that. But the anicca, dukkha, anatma is there, and we know its existence. That is the influence of samma ditti, samma sankappa. Remember, that is wisdom, right? That is wisdom. That is not like, for example, a poster you have hanging up on your wall, which you need to be reminded of. When you take samma ditti, right view and right thought, and when you study that Dhamma, that is taken in a way that now you can see the whatever phenomena that you're observing in your meditation in that due course and way, right? Knowing that there is impermanence in every moment, that is arising and the passing away. And remember, when we do observe, we do not go behind. Let it come to you. Vedananupassana, Kayanupassana, it's the same. Let the object come to you. Let the mind, with regard to Cittānupassana, let the mind come to you. You maintain your knowing mind. Let the noting mind come to you. Don't go looking for the noting mind. Don't go looking for the noting mind, because the mind changes so fast. Objects change so fast. So when you have caught on to one object, it is the past object. We have to be able to be sitting in one place, and then when something happens, I'm looking at the whole room, and when something happens now in this direction, I will know. Why? Because I am aware of this is my position of vision that I have. It is somewhat like that. So we do not go searching for it. Also, conventional sense, the mind is able and has the potential, when right attitude is present through samma ditti, the mind is able to progress far beyond the conventional sense as well. The mind, yes, is programmed and conditioned predominantly by the conventional sense, but through meditation, mindfulness, through Dhamma practice, we can change that. That is why Dhamma learning is also important for this path, right? I hope I answered the question. I feel the observing mind recognizing the noting mind, trying to note every noise, every smell, I feel the observing mind recognizing the noting mind, trying to note every noise, every smell. Though that appears while meditating. So the observing mind would try to stop the noting mind, dominate the thoughts. I notice that the noting mind is externally quick to note and will move quickly. So the observing mind following the noting mind, yet trying not to allow the noting mind to stop and take control. Is this observation right? Yes, it is correct. DD, it is correct, right? It'll get polished up as you go. Keep at it, right? Keep at it. That is correct. Kumuduni, please teach us how to practice Cittānupassana at the moment of death. Please give a guided meditation on that if possible. Thank you. Much merit to you. Kumuduni, please let me know if you are all right. Are you healthy? Just checking. But right now, this is not possible, Kumuduni, but maybe on another day, right? Maybe on another day. But remember the point of do not wait until you are steps away from death to start meditating. This must be a practice that you are cultivating throughout. It is a muscle, right? It is like a muscle. It is like you developing your strength. And remember the practice of Cittānupassana as we are doing it now is not very different from when we would do it on our deathbeds. It's the same thing. The difference here remains the Dhamma. The Dhamma teaches us, look here, if you have lived a good life and all of this with the meditation, mindfulness, all of that, you will be reborn in a position that is comfortable and good, wholesome. However, if you have not, with the arising of akusala, unwholesome minds, there might be some sort of trouble. However, even that is something that you can observe through the mind. So in the future, we will be having the first, the meditation teacher, Sheomin Sayadaw has passed now, but the Venerable Sheomin Sayadaw's student, monk, Venerable Tejaniya, would be doing a retreat and a talk for the Dhamma Center, right? So if you have not subscribed to the Dhamma Center, please do so. So when he does come, obviously he will be able to explain all of this with far greater experience and insight. So make sure that you do subscribe to the Dhamma Center, and you will receive emails about all of these new programs. So Kumuduni, thank you. If you are having more thoughts, give me a call sometime. All right. Nayana, Bante, does the Dhamma Center? Yes, the Dhamma Center does conduct Abhidhamma sessions. It's on every Monday, right? It's on every Monday, and we are actually doing VT at the moment, right? So if you want to join in and just listen, you are most welcome to. The programs of the Dhamma Center is available on the Dhamma Center website. Bhante, is the present moment experience in Cittānupassana meditation same as observing, arising, and passing of all phenomena? It is the same, Padmaji, it is the same. However, the position is different. It is the same, the position is different. This is actually even asked by Sheomin Sayadaw, where it is asked, what is the difference between your technique and the Mahasi technique? It is explained the technique is the same, the standpoint is different, being that this is the mind, right? So here, when we come to the arising and passing away of certain other phenomena, for example, Kaya-nupassana and Vedana-nupassana, because we have already discussed that, in both of those phenomena, the standpoint is a bit different when compared to the Cittānupassana practice. Cittānupassana, mind you, can be used to look at both Kaya-nupassana and Vedana-nupassana as well. Right? Because if you are having a sensation, through the mind, you can observe the mind that is having the sensation, breaking up the me, myself, and I, the ego aspects of the sensation as well, whilst breaking up the ego aspect and connection bond between personalizing that experience of a sensation or a bodily movement. So with Anapanasati, Kaya-nupassana, Vedana-nupassana, Dhamma-nupassana, Cittānupassana can be used to look at all of these phenomena. That is the benefit of Cittānupassana. That is the benefit of Cittānupassana. So the standpoint is different, right? Standpoint is different. Yes, okay. Now, there's one more question that we will quickly finish. Can you please explain when the breath and the body and the mind disappears in Anapanasati, and it can be either dipping into samadhi or in a state of equanimity? How do you proceed? You mentioned, I think, that this was the point from which the Cittānupassana started. Do I presume the beginning of the knowing mind is opposed to the noting mind? Okay, this is not the position. Cittānupassana can start before this as well. It doesn't necessarily have to be this point that Cittānupassana starts, but through Cittānupassana, one may experience the going in and coming out often, right? Into these states of calm and bliss. So in Anapanasati specifically, if we are to focus, In Anapanasati, what you do is you keep on bringing your attention to the breath, because remember, the breath has disappeared. But are you not breathing? You are, of course, breathing. If you are not breathing, you are dead, right? At that point, if you are not breathing, you will die. So we know you are breathing. However, the mind is unable to observe that. What do? You keep your mind directed. You do not observe, or at this point, I mean, this is a very peaceful position to be in. It is very enjoyable. But what do? You do not personalize it and grow comfortable with that experience of peace. However, what you would do is observe the breathing, or direct your attention towards the breathing. Direct it like you would look north or look south. Look towards, observe towards the breath. Then the mind will become more subtle to be able to now observe the breath in that level of subtlety that the breath is in. That is how you move forward from that level. All right, that is how you move forward from that level. Now, that is all the time that we have today. Thank you to everyone who has joined in to today's session. And I'm very happy to know that many of you have found it beneficial. Do, if you have not already subscribed, do subscribe to Dhamma Center. We have so many good teachers from all around the world who we are bringing in through the Dhamma Center to conduct teachings, retreats, and to sort of give these special sort of teachings to people who are serious about meditation, because that is what we try to promote through the Dhamma Center: serious practice and getting to know the Dhamma in a way that you are confident about the Dhamma. So that is what we try to do here at the Dhamma Center. So do support us by, of course, subscribing. And if you have found the session useful, and if you have found other previous sessions useful, and if you would like to support us, you can make a donation towards the Dhamma Center through our website. Also, next week we have Dr. Kamal Vitarna, who is going to be conducting the session on the Dhammanupassana. And afterwards, we are having the panel discussion where we hope to have some extra guests as well. So with all of that, I hope that you will come join us and sort of be with us on all of these journeys that we hope to go on. I wish you all the very best in your practice. And if you are interested in joining any of the other sessions that we host through the Dhamma Center, the timetables are all up on our Facebook page or on our website. Thank you so much. Take care. And for all of you, best wishes with your practice.